Coming at you from the ATL, from inside the paint and beyond the arc. This is Nothin But Nest, your Atlanta Hawks podcast. Now, here are your hosts, DeShaun Tate and Caleb Johnson.
Welcome into Nothin But Nest, episode 31. A really uncomfortable time to be talking about the Atlanta Hawks. Caleb Johnson and with my co-host, DeShaun Tate. DeShaun, it was good to see you today in person. We don't get to do that very often because of our schedules. But like a funeral, it was one of those situations where it was like, good to see you, but I hate the circumstances for which we had to see each other today as Nate McMillan. Yes, of course, unless you've been hiding under a rock. Nate McMillan has been fired by the Atlanta Hawks, or what? They didn't call it a firing. They said that Nate's been dismissed, or what was the correct verbiage? I'm trying to think. Relieved of his duties. Yeah, there we go. Relieved of his duties. Of course, you know, you start going over the record and all of the different things that come with Nate McMillan. Ultimately, this team is a game below 500, 8th in the Eastern Conference, and they have 23 games left to play this season. For you, DeShaun, you know, we got to hear from Landry, and we'll play some of Landry. We got to hear from the players, and we'll play some of that as well. But for you, DeShaun Tate, why do you think the Atlanta Hawks no longer have Nate McMillan as their head coach?
I think the first thing, Caleb, is when you start mentioning words like uncomfortable. You know, sometimes in order to get, you know, things in life are going to be uncomfortable.
Sure.
And in order to get comfortable, you got to go through those uncomfortable moments, and not just go through them, but go through those first before you can get to the comfortable moments. They did this before where they had uncomfortable decisions to make, and then you go and get this guy and he put you in a comfortable position, and now you're going through it again. Anyway, the reasons behind why, I think that there is so many different ways you can go with the reasons behind why, but it just wasn't working. It's a players' league. Let's do that first. Let's do that. Sure. Let that be the first thing. Sure. Is that this is a players' league. And I think
Blame 11, DeShaun. Blame 11. I didn't do it. I didn't do it this time.
Well, you know, we're going with the blame 11 thing a lot later than I thought we would in this show. I thought you would have opened it up with welcome with Nothin But Nest, blame 11, my guest, you know, or my co-host DeShaun Tate, ...
Yeah.
But no, like I just think that besides the fact that it is a players' league, and when things aren't going right, I feel like even if there wasn't, you know, this dust up or this finger pointing at 11 or whatever, all these other things that have transpired, unfortunately, that the Hawks have been in the news for, I still think that we could have potentially been looking at this happening anyway because of what the record is showing and because it's the players' league. But it's just been a little bit more telling, which we'll get into a little bit later based off of some of the comments that the players have made when they were asked that question. So just a new voice, a new way. And I think that all those things just pretty much sum it up. It's a players' league, and you look at the record, and somebody's got to go. It's not gonna be the star player.
Yeah. I guess let's start off with Landry, and him talking about the reason that he, as general manager, decided to let go of Nate McMillan. And there was a reoccurring theme through Landry Field's press conference of making sure that people knew this was a Landry Fields decision, not anyone else, not 11, not Tony Ressler, not Kyle Korver. It was no one but ultimately Landry Fields' decision. At least that's what he wanted to make sure that everyone knew about this. So
you believe that, Caleb?
No, not for a second. Not for it. Look. You want me to be 100% authentic with you right now, DeShaun Tate?
I don't know you to be another way.
We listened to roughly 30 minutes of Landry Fields answering questions on Wednesday. 75% of what he said was absolute fluff, garbage, bull, whatever you want to call it. It was not factual. It was skirting the truth to paint the franchise in a positive light. There was some truth out of the things that I believe, and this is my opinion. This is strictly my opinion based on information that I know about this team because there were bold-faced lies that Landry Fields told during this press conference based on information that I have. And on the fact that I've known in the past that there's kind of been a running joke of when it's time for these big press conferences is when, all right, send out the guy to go lie to everyone. And that's, I'm also really skeptical, though, and I recognize that as well, DeShaun. But let's listen to Landry talk about his reasoning for firing Nate McMillan.
As of late, my pulse and my read on this team and the changes that we're making and the things that we want to implement felt like this was the time to make a change. And that was the sense that I've gotten, something that I've read on, and this was my decision.
Okay, so based on Landry Fields' pulse of the team, he did later go on, DeShaun, to specifically point out the loss at the Charlotte Hornets and at home to the New York Knicks to finish out right before the All-Star game, that those two specific performances were a lot of the reason why he made this decision. And he talked a lot about this idea of like the message not getting through, or the players. Essentially, he was skating around. Nate was talking, and the players weren't listening. They weren't taking it to heart. They weren't being coached. There was that the Peanuts cartoon, the wah 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 wah. Yeah, there was someone talking, and apparently
you were old enough to know about that, Caleb.
Yeah, I could surprise you. I know I'm just dopey millennial, but I've got I've got an older sibling, and I got parents who have cultured me well in old cartoons and things like that. But that's what it felt like. At least that's what the painted picture we were given, is that this came from, the fact of Nate's message wasn't resonating anymore, which I thought was interesting because, people have pointed out that Nate's message did work in 2021. So getting back to this idea of why didn't it work and why is Nate McMillan fired?
I think, and I think this same question was asked to John, right?
Yep.
And he mentioned something I think is very true. It's not the same team either. It's not the same roster. You had certain guys on the roster at that time that you don't have anymore. You did have the Gallinaris, and you did have the Kevin Herters, and you did have the whom I'm missing someone, Lou Williams, and
oh yeah,
I think the one guy who can't think of his name, went to Arizona. Anyways, it doesn't matter. But one of the elder guys on the team, or
Solomon Hill.
Solomon Hill. You had some of these other guys, that was on the roster at that time, which could maybe have been, and some of that I don't think is on Nate's fault. I mean, you had extensions of the coach that you may not necessarily have. Guys that maybe, sometimes when you're going through certain things in life, and everybody's gotten to a point where they don't agree with certain things when it comes to their parents, and maybe you have to talk to other people, maybe some of your friends or family members or whatever, what have you, that gets across the exact same message that your parents are trying to send to you, but you just need to hear it through a different voice. Maybe that was the case then. They had guys that could be an extension of the coach that they don't have on that roster anymore. And it just wasn't being very receptive when the only person you have left is the coach, who you just don't really want to listen to. So you move out of your parents' house. In this case, the parents move out of their own house, and it's your house now. But let me ask you this. because people are going to be skeptical. People are going to go in circles and talk about this, that, and the other and point fingers and whatever else. Here's the elephant in the room, whether that be to you, Caleb, or whether it be to Hawks fans. The question is the one that everybody wants to know. How much emphasis Trey had on the front office to make this decision. That's ultimately what it's going to come down to.
So was Trey asked, or do I believe that Trey had his opinion weighed in on whether or not Nate McMillan would be the head coach? Like, did Landry call up Trey before making this decision, get his blessing? No. Did Landry look at the relationship that Trey Young and Nate McMillan had with each other and use that as part of his decision? 100%. Yeah. And now Landry was also very clear to say that no players, not just Trey Young, but no players had a say in this decision, and he does not need, Landry said, does not need the player's opinion to make the next head coaching hire. However, we're smarter than that. He may not necessarily go to Trey and say, hey, these are the 3 candidates I'm looking at. Who do you want? However, there are conversations that can be had there, with your star player of going, okay, what do you value in a coach, and just this is not his first day on the job. He's been talking to Trey for quite some time, so he knows potentially what could work for these guys. But getting back to Nate just a little bit, I think the thing that bothers me is that it's not all on Nate, and I feel like I'm seeing too many people on it's either all Nate's fault or it's all Trey's fault. And neither of those perspectives are correct. And I did appreciate the fact that John Collins did speak on this. DeJounte Murray did speak on this, of like, we share in the responsibility. And Landry too. We share in the responsibility of this team being where it was. Landry, I think, well, specifically the front office. I won't put it all on Landry because he wasn't there for all of these decisions, but the front office bears a major responsibility. The ownership, takes a major responsibility in this, because as what you were just talking about, DeShaun, with the fact of this isn't the same team as 2021. It's not as mature. It's just not. Like, this team can't be put together based on what you see on paper of going, all right, we got a point guard, and we got, a 2 guard, and we got a 3-and-D guy, and we got a big man, and we got a backup big man. This team can't be built like that. It's got to be built on, hey, do we have veterans in the locker room? When Bogey Bogdanovic is your veteran, and I'm not saying Bogey is immature by any stretch of the imagination. It's just he's not very old. Probably doesn't have the biggest voice in the room, just based on the other guys in the room.
He doesn't have a lot of postseason experience either.
No. And he also missed the first 30 games.
Yeah, exactly. Start talking about vocal leadership, when you start talking about veteran leadership, when you start talking about, production on the floor, a lot of that, like you said, being healthy and so forth, you don't have that. And that kind of goes back to what we've been talking about for quite some time. How you need more adults. Mm-hmm. I've mentioned that multiple times. I've mentioned the multiple times how, where's the edge guy? Where's the Draymond / Jay Crowder / Marcus Smart / Ivan Johnson / where's that guy at?
But DeShaun, some of the guys you're naming there, and I think this is the fatal flaw in this current team that was put together, is you've got to, and Solo kind of, like, he was at first this guy who played well enough that he could speak and his voice would be heard. I think this front office and this ownership maybe thought a guy like Justin Holiday could be that person of coming in, being that veteran, and then being like, hey guys, we need to do this, we need to do that, and everybody was going to listen. And no, this team leadership wise does not listen to guys unless they back up their performance.
Whose decision was that? Like, who was the guy that said, and you know what? Justin Holiday is gonna be like who because that guy is just as much at fault.
You can't fire that guy, DeShaun, because that guy owns the team.
Fine, listen, I'm not here to this, that, and the other. At the end of the day, okay, no matter what it is, you've got to know at least that much too. Mm-hmm. As the it could be owner, CEO, whoever, whatever, part owner, this, that, you got to know that who's listening to Justin Holiday in any, you understand what I'm saying? Capacity.
Like I think other teams would. I think other teams would.
And because
you've got different levels of maturity. When you have, and I don't mind saying, this Hawks team is immature. When you have an immature team, you need someone who is the leader, who backs up their performance, like who backs up their words with their performance. Like you need that type of guy. Other teams don't necessarily need that. Other teams can work on, hey, Jokic is the guy that got thrown out there by a lovely former head coach, George Karl. But the thing that we know about Nikola Jokic is that he's quiet, but he is a leader on that Nuggets team because he balls out.
Yeah.
And then it seems, at least from the outside, that they have a more mature team who responds to that type of leadership. I think the Hawks, they need someone who is older. It seems like Lou Will was a leader in the past. I've heard in recent days of like how much of a leader he actually was is up for debate, and whether he did a lot of good for this team or whether he maybe steered them towards, go get yours. I don't know. There's just, of course, when things happen like this, all kinds of rumors get floated around. Cool. But it just, it makes you go, huh, okay, no adults in the room. You have a star who just doesn't really seem to be a leader, and we've had conversations about whether or not he needs to be, but somebody needs to be. It was Nate McMillan. Like, Nate McMillan was definitely a guy that this team rallied around in 2021. They went from having a bad situation with Lloyd Pierce where he definitely had lost the locker room, and you make this change, and it's like, okay, Nate is a veteran. He's a guy who's done it before. He played in this league. He coached in this league for a long time. He's going to be the one that leads them to this, championship aspirations type goals that they had. And yet that's why I start to lean back, DeShaun, and go like, okay, so then the front office wasn't paying attention. Because as you alluded to earlier, I think one of the things that John Collins said was one of the most profound like honest conversations about Nate McMillan is that Nate McMillan is not about dealing with young players. The joke with Nate is that he doesn't play rookies, but it's more so because he's not about the nonsense. Why did he play AJ Griffin? AJ Griffin wasn't immature. AJ Griffin's a very, very mature 19-year-old. He's more mature than some of the 24-year-olds on this team, quite honestly.
Hell, he's more mature than some of the 38-year-olds that I know. But I also look at this, though, too, Caleb. You mentioned a couple things. One of them being, leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I do question different people's definition of leadership. That's just the first part.
Can you honestly say that Trae Young is a leader on this team?
In certain categories, yes, I can. Absolutely.
Okay. So
Without question.
There's leader.
There's other areas of leadership that I think that he is not a good leader in this team.
But that leader's gotten 2 coaches fired and has led his team to one conference championship or one conference finals and then back-to-back disappointing seasons.
Well, this is the thing though, Caleb. Like, this is what kills me, because people is easy to quick and say he's got 2 coaches fired, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the reality to me, in my opinion, and not that I know this to be for sure, but on the outside looking in, and what feels like most people would agree, you bring in somebody, excuse me, like Lloyd Pierce to take over for the team where they blow the whole thing up. They're bringing in brand new guys, need a star player. They're top in the draft, ...
Mm-hmm.
To fill in for Budenholzer. You're bringing in Lloyd Pierce, who's a first-time coach and got all these other people advocating for him and so on and so forth. You know that he's coming in as the developmental guy and that he's just really here for a long enough span until these guys kind of grow up a little bit and have some sort of identity for themselves. And if you have exceeded, not just met, probably have to exceed the expectations that we have for you, then we'll consider you we will consider you stand. But outside of that, you know that you are essentially the stop that we have to make to go get the next guy. That's essentially what Lloyd Pierce is until unless you exceed the expectations. How much did Trae have to do with that? I'm sure some. I don't think that Trae is the only person. When we say he got another guy fired, are they listening to Trae and only Trae? And that was the next question I was going to ask you, is that when we're going back to the Nate McMillan situation, how much fear did, I'm not even going to say Trae put into the front office? How much fear did the front office have in, if we don't do what we got to do to make our star player happy, then he might shake on us and go elsewhere. And that's something that you also cannot afford, amongst other things. Because one thing you're not going to do, you're not going to take your chances rolling the dice with Nate McMillan while Trae walks and see what the team looks like. I mean, that's a bonehead decision to make. But I'm not totally on board with saying that he got 2 coaches fired. Like, I think those coaches had some things to do with them getting themselves fired.
Sure.
Too.
But
I think some of those other guys on the team who maybe did not come with, doing everything that they needed to do from game 0, whatever game we're on now, but from game 1 all the way up until the game that we're, at right now, didn't do all the things that they needed to do all the time either. And some of them weren't on the floor, they weren't healthy or whatever, what have you. So I just, that narrative of Trae got coaches fired, I think that's a little weird to me.
Here's why I buy into it. It's not all his fault, and it's not all on the coach. We kind of had this discussion about everybody shares a little bit to blame. However, if we're going to say Trae's a leader, all right, where's his leadership shown up? Where is the positive leadership shown up? Because the leadership that I can recount is, a guy who doesn't get along with his head coach. He didn't get along with Lloyd Pierce towards the end. He didn't get along with Nate McMillan towards the end. He wanted to play. He constantly challenged in post-game press conferences whatever the head coach said. His opinion was never, yeah, I agree. It was no, actually, I think X, Y, and Z. The other element of this is what you just alluded to, of the front office being worried that he's going to jump ship if they don't do what he wants. You don't think the rest of the team sees that and is like, oh, okay? Because I happen to know around the trade deadline, and when this front office made some changes and went from Travis Schlenk to Landry Fields, that there was a question posed to the team of like, hey, we want everybody playing together, and if you're not all in, then have a meeting. Landry will have a meeting with everybody, and he'll, you can express your interest to be moved somewhere else, and over half the team expressed their interest of, not that I necessarily want to leave, but hey, if that offer's on the table, I'm fine. That's like that. Those aren't positive aspects. Like, that's the stuff that concerns me. It like, there's so, and I hate being like this, DeShaun, and I don't want to shift the conversation entirely this direction. It's just that because there's so many good things that Trey does, so many incredibly impressive things that Trey does, but the immaturity stuff that I feel like we see that reared its head again. Nate McMillan gets fired, and you know who's nowhere to be seen? Your leader, Trey Young. Where's he at? Oh, he's going to talk tomorrow.
I want to get on that. I want to get to that. I'm glad that you said that. I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Here's what I will say to the other stuff. Because I don't think there's a question about, people's concerns about Trey from a maturity standpoint. I do think that there are some things, no matter how you want to look at it, whatever, it makes Trey look bad. And we'll get to some more of that about him not showing up. But we talk about Trey getting guys fired. How about the reality? This is a franchise that has that vibe, energy, feel that it doesn't even know which direction it is going in. You've got guys stepping down over here. You've got, owners' sons now doing this over here. You've got owners doing that over there. Now you've got this other person coming in doing this over here. It looks very discombobulated and very unorganized, but even more so, they don't know whether they're coming or going sometimes. It's like the blind leading the blind. Instead of pointing the finger saying 11 got somebody fired, and if they're taking the consideration of a 24-year-old young man, right, and he's the one, first of all, if he's the real GM making the decisions here, and he's playing basketball, and he's leading the league in points, and he's leading the league in assists, and he's doing all these other things facing franchise.
But he's not leading the league in wins.
And I understand that, and he never has, and he probably never will. Who knows? But at the end of the day, the reality is, if he's wearing all these different hats, 200 and something million is not enough, in my opinion. But the reality, what the truth is that if that's the case, and they're putting all this emphasis into a 24-year-old guy who shoots, plays basketball and whatever else, that the front office is who got you fired. Then it's not the player. It's the front office that's putting all of this emphasis into something to give someone all of this voice, if that's the case. Like, I just.
But we talk about it being a player-driven league. It's a player, like, the players run this league. Like, that is, they make the money, they control the franchise based on their success, based on them making it work with their teammates. And so, if you're in a position where the guy who is your star, he's not helping the team in a what I would consider a mature way, how is that not on him? Like, I know he doesn't. It's not only on him, but it just feels like at some point, and with every franchise, if it doesn't work out, the star, we never questioned LeBron James.
Don't stop.
We never questioned
the star, the guy that's making the money, the face of the franchise. We have all these expectations. I think we've been down this road before. We have all these expectations that I think are unrealistic, and putting all this emphasis on what we want them to be, what a leadership looks like through our lens. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
I can tell you what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like a guy who skips out on games. It doesn't look like a guy who doesn't face the media when the lights are the brightest. It doesn't look like a lot of what we've seen from Trey, unfortunately.
And that I agree with you is definitely a bad look. Like when you mentioned something about that earlier. So we're at the press conference and this player comes over to speak. This second player comes over to speak. This third player comes over to speak. This coach comes over to speak. And everybody really wants to know. He knows why people are there. He knows what this is about. For me personally, again, me, who's on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
I'm not in there with them. Let's just be straight up.
You're staying in your lane.
I'm staying right in mine. But here's the thing. That what I think was his opportunity, right? To come to the media himself, right? Forget about PR. They'll listen to you. You're the GM, remember? You're the GM. You're the points. You're the assist. You're the this. You're the that. You're wearing all these hats. So you can do what you want to do, just to be fair. If in the event that this is the case, you can come over to the media and say, hey, guys, I'm going to make this really quick, off the record, on the record, whatever. Okay. I got to go. I got something really, really important I want to attend that I have to attend to. You may think, what else could be more important than this? You're a basketball. I got something really, we're all human. We don't know what could be going on. I have something really important that I have to attend to, but I do also understand that you guys are here and what you're talking, what you want to talk about. I understand that you have questions that you want to ask. And I do apologize genuinely and sincerely for taking up, you guys' time. And I don't want to waste too much more of it, but I'll be here tomorrow. I'll give you my word. I'll be here early and I'll answer every single each and every one of those questions that you guys have for me, considering everything that has transpired. It's just gonna have to be tomorrow. As long as it's within the time constraints of what PR will allow me to have this conversation and answer these questions, I will do that. I just cannot do it today. At least then people will feel like I definitely didn't get what I needed to get today, because that's why we're here, and you know that. But I'll try to understand that a little bit. I'll try to respect the fact. I'll try. I don't really want to, but I appreciate you owning up. A lot of guys probably aren't going to do that. Just because DeShaun Tate will probably do that does not mean that we should have the expectations that he will do that, because that's probably just not who he is. And that's fine. That's just a decision that he can make. But guess what? If PR or if the league or if the franchise, the organization, whomever, whatever, does not put him in position where he has to and he can do what he wants to do, then of course he's going to be able to do what he wants to do. And at that point, can you really blame him? Because you get a chance to do what you call in the shots. When you call the shots, not when somebody else thinks that you should. When you call the shots, then that's when you can decide when you come and when you go.
And it's his decision, and that's part of my whole issue is that how convenient, that you're able to post on Instagram. Mm-hmm. Maybe somebody from his team did it. But you can't meet the day that there are 6 to 8 cameras and another 10 media members probably standing around. But you'll come back the next day when likely you're banking on it being the usual 3 to 4 that you normally get.
That's not it. But that part isn't necessarily his fault. That our schedules don't match up with when he can speak. Fair. That doesn't have anything to do with him. If he is really the guy, the GM, and all the things I'm facetiously speaking on, then yes, he can come and go and he play. I don't have no. It might be double the amount that it was today when tomorrow rolls around. Depends on how important that is to the media. I can't say. I don't know, and that's not advocating for him. I'm just trying to look at it as a human. We get so caught up. Not saying you, not saying other people. Me, I even get caught up doing this. Sometimes, being a media member and we think things should go the way that we want them to go. And sometimes I feel like the same way we say player empowerment and entitlement, sometimes we could be entitled sometimes too.
That's fair.
At least
fair.
I would just raise my hand. At least I'm guilty. I've been guilty of that before.
Right so, there.
Those things are being considered though, Caleb, like this isn't an out for Trey, because things look bad for a reason. Lots of things, more than just one instance, more than just two instances. Things optically don't look good. And we get that. And that's some of the things that I think that he has to improve upon, that he has to work upon. We know this relationship between two of them. I talked to you about this earlier. They went out to, what is it, Abu Dhabi, whatever, this place, that place, preseason, whatever, left a week earlier to go out there to bond and develop and establish this relationship with amongst one another, and all their families come out. And then even more so, some people feel a way about the fact that, Nate flew out to Oklahoma and spent some time with Trey in the middle of the season or whatever, what have you. And, had I don't know, a couple drinks, whatever the hell that they were doing to try to get some common ground, which I do commend whoever idea that was. To my understanding, that was Nate, but I don't know. But regardless of all of those things, like, it's a narrative. Even the other guys on the team have come forward and said, not only do I think it was all of our faults, that we're all at fault for it, but even more so, that his philosophy, maybe his philosophy or his schemes or whatever, what have you. You got sound to that? Because I thought we were probably going to jump to that at some point.
About what exactly?
I don't know, some along the line, the age of the type of players that
that he's better built for a veteran team.
There you go.
Yeah. Let's play that.
I feel like me personally, sometimes with teams that are younger, right? Me being a veteran at 25 and CC, and I think Bogey is probably our oldest guy. Coach Mack is more so, I'd say, suited for guys who are in a different part of their careers.
Yeah.
And just us being as young as we are, we feel like we need to focus on just a couple of different things. And I really feel like, it wasn't more so the basketball, just where we're at mentally. That was the biggest gap. So.
Yeah, so he's talking about Nate being better suited for a veteran team. That was really code for Nate is better suited for a more adult, a more responsible, I don't know, a more guys that don't, and John also said that was guys that don't need to be developed, that he can kind of come in and he's not holding anybody's hand, and he didn't at any point. I won't say that entirely. I think he did that initially, kind of coming in, and maybe that was part of what worked in 2021, was doing a little hand holding and a little like believe, say, we got you, you can do it, come on, you got it, like you do to your, I'm sure you'll do very soon to your daughter as she grows up. You can do it. You can walk. You can run. You can swim. You can do whatever that activity is. And it seems that John in that moment is talking about, wasn't necessarily the basketball stuff that was the biggest issue. Although, to your point, that probably shared in some of the issues that they had.
Could it have been code for? Because I agree with you on what that could have definitely been code for, and just based off of what he said. But could it have been code for not just about older players or more mature players or more seasoned players, more experienced players? Could have been code for probably better suited as a coach for late 90s and early 2000s basketball? Could it have been code for guys that maybe you could have related to about 20 years ago, but we're just not relatable to you? And that hints the question that I asked to Clint about the importance of whomever this next coach may be, and who the last coach was, the importance of coaches who are relatable to their players.
But why don't we say this about Greg Popovich? Why don't we say this about what's another old coach in the league? I'm blanking on names, but like guys who did do it for a long time. A Doc Rivers. Doc played in the same time that Nate did. Why is he not getting thrown out as unrelatable? Why is it Nate that's taking the hit for this sort of?
But just because you're in the same age range doesn't mean that I can relate to you in the same ways. I mean, two of those coaches that you just named, they have a combined of how many wins and how many titles? Like, there's gonna become a certain level of respect. There's gonna become a different level of listening to. There's gonna become a different level of many different things when you start running down these guys' resumes versus these guys' resumes. Some of those things probably do make a difference.
So you think this? I mean, so it feels like you're saying like this Hawks team looked at Nate McMillan's resume and was like, "Oh, you don't have a chip, so."
I don't think that they necessarily had to do that either. Like me personally, and I'm not like, I think that the side of the fence that I'm on is that, I think there's some guys that are putting too much emphasis on Nate for the reason for the firing, and there's some people that's not putting enough. There's some people that's putting too much, just like what you talked about. It doesn't have to be one side of the coin. It doesn't have to be all this guy or all that guy.
Correct.
I'm just kind of in the middle. I didn't see some of the things that some people saw within Nate that was just like, oh my God, get this dude out of here. And then I didn't see some of the things within Nate that's like, this dude's just not the problem at all. It's just got to be this one guy, number 11. Like, I didn't see all of those things. But I will say enough to say that, like, I would have been okay if he was still the coach throughout the remainder of the season. I don't like to see anybody lose their job per se.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But within all of those things, I like to say that, Nate McMillan is just clearly not a guy that they could. It wasn't getting through to them, and it wasn't one guy. Guess what? Of what we heard today, more than one guy from what we heard today say that his way was not getting through to them. That wasn't even 11 because we never got a chance to talk to him. So it can't
be. Do you think, though, that all of those guys were in a roundabout way saying...
Don't say it. I know you ain't about to say what I think you're about to say.
Hey, he didn't get through to all of us. He didn't get through to all of us. He got through to me because I feel like that's what we got from John. I feel like that's what we got from DeShaun Tate. I thought that's what we got from Clint.
I didn't get that. I didn't get that at all.
Clint was very
Clint, I think, was a different ball game.
He was very honest in that it worked sometimes and it didn't work every time. However,
and the question was asked about to Clint specifically, as it relates to you specifically. And then they got into sometimes about the rotations or sometimes into and we got to go back and listen to that audio. But I didn't get the same thing that you got at all. I didn't get the same thing you got at all. I didn't.
I think
I felt like I heard guys definitely mention that there were definitely and I heard that coming from DeJounte, where number one, he only has so much leg to stand on because he just got here. But even more because of the fact that who knows, maybe Nate's philosophy, system, and ways was working beneficial to him, but maybe not to everybody, kind of like what you just alluded to. But I don't think that this was more so about, well, it didn't get through to the star player, so it didn't get through to everybody. Like, I don't think that was, I didn't come away from that with that, because I thought where you was going, where you were going was like, I don't even want to repeat it because that just can't possibly be what's happening here.
I think there was thinly veiled shots thrown of maybe not just Trey. I'm not just saying it would be only Trey, but that Trey would have been one of those guys who, the message definitely wasn't getting through to him,
Yeah.
And so because of that, there's a trickle down effect to that.
Yeah.
Guys are going to look up to him. They are going to, like, whether he wants to be or whether he is a leader or he's a leader in one way or another. And one of those ways would be to go, yeah, I don't believe in your philosophy anymore. Because I know what was something that we constantly heard the back and forth of Trey and Nate when they would come to the post-game press conferences. Nate would be like, talk about shot selection and not enough passes, and we're taking our first shot, taking our first look, and taking bad looks. And then Trey would come in and talk about shots just didn't fall tonight, and we needed to play faster. We needed to play faster, and just shots weren't falling tonight, and that was the difference. And like we would have this back and forth, and it just kind of constantly felt like, specifically, 11 was one who wasn't gelling with Nate, and there's no like that's no secret.
Yeah.
And not that he was the only one, but it I don't know. It felt interesting. I thought the fact that DeJounte, the fact that John repeatedly brought up accountability, and those were the two guys talking to us after this firing. The one guy who wasn't there wasn't able to take accountability. And that's why I feel like all of these things kind of, whether it's coincidental or not, this is the look that you end up getting.
That's the look. And that's the look that he is helping create himself, and that he's not painting himself in a good light. Because when you're not there, much like what we said X amount of weeks or months ago about when you're not there to defend yourself and whatever else, then all we are left with is this. So I do understand that part too. That doesn't mean that it is this. That just means if you ain't defending yourself, I don't think it should always be looked at like, well, he didn't come to the point to defend himself, so it must be. You know what I'm saying? I think on top of that though, Caleb, is like where you have these instances where you're about to say something. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say, part of the feeding into narrative that may or may not be right is, for one, Trey, time and time again, and he is totally within his right, even though I might disagree, of saying, hey, this is a private matter, or these are conversations just for us to have. This is information that you as the media don't need to know. And it's like, okay, so people are going to connect the dots, right, wrong, or indifferent. The latest dot that, I'll say it, that I connected kind of jokingly, but kind of at the same time, like, I don't know, is when it comes to head coaching hires. And just briefly, I wanted to get into this. I know we'll have a lot more time to talk about head coaching hires in the future, and I want to give it its due diligence. Sure. But briefly, before we do get out of here, just on the idea of Trey didn't speak, and then he did post on Instagram, and he's wearing a Steve Nash jersey of like, here are these perfectly harmless vacation photos. I just happened to post, 5 minutes after I potentially could have been talking to media, or maybe it was later than that. Maybe it was like 30. I can't remember. I was in my car, and I saw it, and I just started laughing of like, Steve Nash jersey. Could be completely coincidental, but
it's weird.
Yeah. When your team's looking for a head coach, and they floated out some names like Quinn Snyder, I was kind of surprised that Landry Fields actually
address.
Yeah, he said, hey, Quinn's going to be among the names that we look at. But for your star player to not talk to the media and then to go post that, it could be completely coincidental. It's just, like we're talking about, it further feeds into a narrative that gets built, that you go, okay, some subliminal messaging being put out here that this is a guy that Trey wants.
For sure, which is funny too, Caleb, because of the simple fact that, someone else caught a hold on to that and sent it to me and was like, so what do you think this means? And I'm just kind of like, well, what do you think this means? And it's like, well, it's funny the different things that people are taking from it, because I kind of thought we were like on the same page, but this person was like, so does this mean he's going to Phoenix? And I'm like, oh no. Never mind. You weren't listening to the podcast on that day, clearly, you know what I mean, type of deal. But we had this conversation, Caleb. Me and you, it's very simple. We'll go back and we'll find, the date and the link and everything else. We talked about, when the rumor first got started, different potential hires and candidates and so forth. You threw out Ime Udoka, I think it was. Is that correct?
Yeah, the potential that, and now Mark Stein.
Which I still don't. Oh, what did he say?
Mark Stein has said that Ime Udoka is going to be a name that the Atlanta Hawks look at. Shocker.
Well, not a bad idea to me. I mean, I'd consider, and I got my own reasons for that. And I know people ain't gonna love them, but I got my own reasons. But even more so, you mentioned Udoka, which I think is solid, and I think, and I mentioned the name Steve Nash for different reasons. Not because I think that he's this amazing coach and deserves the opportunity and all these other things, but you want to keep a star player happy. That might be the way you go. The crazy part is, we're having these conversations about what these comments that these players mentioned. I think we can find a happy medium here somewhere in what we both heard from the comments from players today, and that is that there is a very good chance and highly likely that when they mentioned something about accountability amongst other things, that they were definitely talking about Trey. I think somebody said, you care to mention any names? He's like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
But so while we can definitely feel confident and comfortable feeling like that's probably who they were talking about, I think that we can equally feel confident and comfortable that they were likely also saying, there were some things that I was okay with Nate's philosophies, but there was also some things that I just was not okay with. And I think that's what we gathered from it. And here we are now talking about developmental coaches. We're still talking about development. Like, you've been looking for, you're from here, Caleb. I'm not from here. You're from here. You're born and raised on this soil. How long? I've been here almost 18 years, and they've been crying about star players, getting a star player who wants to come here and this, that, and the other for I don't know how long. If they would have, everybody, you get your star player, you got fan bases feeling, not saying you can't feel your own way about certain things, but it's weird how you're for this person, and then on the back end, you're not for this person anymore. Do you think NBA players are paying attention to that just as much as the coaches were paying attention to the Trae Young stuff behind why he wasn't getting voted as an all-star? Do you think that those players are paying attention to the thing? See, that's exactly, had they run Trae out, hey, this is exactly why people don't want to play in Atlanta. Like, there's going to be so many different scenarios. There's going to be so many different narratives.
They ranked him as the 12th best guard in the Eastern Conference when he's clearly third or fourth. So yes, I do think the rest of the NBA is hearing these things.
But do you think that the rest of the players are also seeing, not necessarily about mistreatment, but one thing you got to remember, we all look at player empowerment or player entitlement as one thing because we're not that player. But if you were a basketball player, how would you be feeling based off of the way that Trae, you know what I'm saying, is getting or lack thereof? Because make no mistake about it, he's still in Atlanta. It still took him how long to get another player of the caliber of a DeJounte Murray? And DeJounte Murray's no all-star player. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, but I'm just saying they're taking steps. They are. I'm not necessarily buying into the we don't want to play with Trae Young thing as much as some people think that that's a real thing. That's just of my personal opinion. I don't see that nearly as much as some people say that they think players see that. I just, you're talking about development coaches all over again. Like, I think the moment that we see development coach is the more and more that it's made clear that at some point this is just going to go off the rails and that we can be looking at very few guys left on this team in the next year or close to 2, probably not even taking that long.
But that's part of it, DeShaun, is because I won't be surprised if they go development coach, because you do have a narrative about Trey that Landry was asked about, and Landry was like, oh, no, I'm not worried about that. Like, if people have concerns, they can talk to me. Well, guess what? That's not how life works. People talk to other people, and they find out.
I asked.
Yeah, and they find out other information, and so if they're not always going to come to you, Landry, for the facts, because that's your opinion. You're the guy running the ship, though. So they're going to ask other people that have worked with him, that have worked with Trey, and find out this sort of thing. So that's, yeah.
That's the question I asked him. I sat there directly.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of the first question I asked, I didn't want to answer it. By all means, I don't think it was a complicated question. I thought it was pretty good. What kind of conversations are you having with the interim coach about what elephants in the room do you have with your interim coach about how it has to be addressed? I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. But following that up now with saying, what do you tell a coach who's you're interviewing and so forth? When they say that they have concerns about the things that took place here, what do you and it's just like, yeah, you can come and ask me, which,
yeah,
I mean,
they can. They just probably won't. And that's why when you're in a situation where you've got rumblings about, disagreements with a star and his head coach, when you've got cap situations that they're looking at next year where they're already over the cap, and that doesn't involve adding talent, that involves taking away talent from this team. You've got all of these different things going on, and you have to be realistic with yourself of like, is this an appealing team to come be a part of, or am I going to be just like Lloyd and just like Nate and see my fate sealed after a couple of seasons because I'm not Houdini and I'm not able to perform magic with a roster that was not set up for success. Lloyd Pierce wasn't given a roster set up for success. I think what Nate McMillan took over in 2021 was, however, everybody else in the Eastern Conference got better in 2022. The Hawks settled for, we're going to double down and stick with what we've got. That didn't work. And then now we've got this convoluted, we improved the roster with DeShaun Tate, but we also regressed in many different areas, including specifically something I've been harping on for so long, the bench being, such a problem that now we expect Sadiq Bey is going to fix everything. Like there's just so much back and forth that the Hawks have to be realistic that, unfortunately, you might swing for the fences for a Quinn Snyder or a Steve Nash or a Kenny Atkinson, and you might end up with a player development guy like maybe Charles Lee or the Kings, Jordy Fernandez, who was part of developing Kyrie Irving and Tristan Thompson in Cleveland. So we could go at this all night, DeShaun. I feel like I want to put a pen in things, see if we get any optimism out of Friday's game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. When the Hawks play the Cavs on Friday, it will be game 2 of a back-to-back for the Cavaliers. So maybe you start this thing out on the right foot. We got to talk to John, which makes me think, okay, John is potentially out of concussion protocol, could potentially be ready for Friday's game. I don't know. That's where my optimism goes. Do you have any optimism or anything like that before we get out of here?
I'm just preparing for the whole, now they want to act like they know how to play. That's what I'm preparing for, because that's what happens. That's what happened after Lloyd's dismissal. Good chance that that's what's going to happen here.
However, the Hawks do have the 3rd most difficult schedule. According to strength of schedule, how many games other teams have won, the Hawks have the 3rd most difficult schedule for these final 23 games. So not a good setup to go on such a miraculous run.
Sure. Sure. No, it is, it is what it is. It's gonna be what it's gonna be, and all you can do is wear your red. Wear your red. Come ready to be loud
and believe.
Come ready to come ready to believe.
Believe.
Come ready
for coach.
Come ready to support. And make sure that you're doing your part. That's essentially where I'll land my plane.
All right. With that being said, thanks everybody for watching us on YouTube and listening to the podcast. Do all of the like, subscribe, give us 5 stars. What does Bomani say? If you give us 4 stars, you're a hater. So do all of that stuff. Get us in our good graces with our bosses. We'll bring you another 2 episodes next week. We'll be on a regular schedule and hopefully get to talk about some Hawks wins. For my co-host DeShaun Tate, I'm Caleb Johnson. Thanks to listening to Nothing But Nest.